This episode brought to you by How to Write Manga, your complete guide to the secrets of Japanese comic book storytelling. Available wherever fine ebooks are sold.
The world has gone insane. Cosplayers rule the conventions. Gamers dominate the tabletop and the internet. Sci-fi subjugates the movies, and fantasy rules the bookstore with an iron fist. Only one group can bring order to this unruly mob. A team of uber geeks, masters of the nerdly arts, trained for decades in the hobby shops and basements of the nation. Mobilized by the secret masters, they are the Department of Nerdly Affairs.
Hello, operatives, and welcome to the Department of Nerdly Affairs. I'm your host, Rob Patterson, here with my co-host, Don Chisholm. How you doing tonight, Don?
Woo! I'm here.
Okay.
Having fun.
All right. The fun is about to start. However, tonight you are the one bringing the fun.
I am?
Yes, you are, sir. Because rumor has it that you have a rather unusual hobby. And I'm not talking about the one that involves the bodies in the basement.
Oh, good. We promised we wouldn't say anything about that.
Well, actually, wait a sec. No, I guess I really am talking about the bodies in the basement. I mean, do you keep them in plastic bags?
Sometimes. Sometimes I just keep pieces in a coffee maker.
Well, there we go. I think we've covered it pretty nicely, and I'm sure our audience is probably starting to think, "What the hell?" We're actually talking about Don's action figure collection. In fact, Don doesn't just make action figures; he builds action figures, like custom ones. And I thought we'd talk about that this evening. Although, actually, I guess I should clarify the terminology first. So, Don, do you call them action figures, or what do you call them? Okay.
No, they're action figures.
They're action figures, so they're not like dolls or anything, right?
No.
Okay, just making sure.
And there is a difference.
Okay, what's the difference?
Well, the biggest difference, as far as most people are concerned, who keep track of this sort of thing, is dolls are typically clothes horses with limbs. That they're not very articulated. They're not designed to hold, like, say, handheld accessories and such. They're mostly designed as a way to show off an outfit. Whereas action figures are designed usually for playability.
Okay, so would that mean all those like 90s and 2000s Spawn action figures and the other like McFarlane quote-unquote action figures that they put out are really dolls because they really just stand there, those in-action figure things?
Technically no, because again, dolls are usually designed specifically for the outfits and such.
Oh, okay, that's true. Okay.
Yeah, those were collectibles.
Oh, okay, those are collectibles. Got it. Okay, so I think we should probably do a little rewind here. So is there a particular type of action figure you actually collect, or a particular line, I guess you could say?
The sad fact is, no, I do a bunch.
Okay.
But the bestest ones for customizing are the old Mego figures.
I see. Well, okay, so why don't you tell us a little bit about Mego? Like, where does the name Mego come from? When I think of Mego, I think of the group that did that disco cover of the original Star Wars theme.
That's Meco.
Oh, that's Meco. I thought it was like Meco or something. Okay.
Oh, no. There's Mego. There is a techno band called Mego.
Oh, okay. Even better.
Yeah.
Okay, so, well, I guess there's no link between Star Wars and Mego then, is there?
Well, there is, kind of. It's a broken link, but...
Okay, well, why don't you tell us the story?
Well, okay, first things first, because I'm betting a lot of our listeners aren't necessarily 40 years old like us.
Mm-hmm.
What the kind of, I guess, the genesis of the Mego action figure starts back in the 60s with G.I. Joe.
The original G.I. Joe, those, like, foot-tall thingies.
Yeah, because those came out back in the day. The idea was to make, basically, Barbie for boys.
Okay.
And that's where this idea of well, the definition I go by, a lot of people go by, that it was an action figure was because the original G.I. Joe, the 12-inch one, was super jointed, and he had hands that could hold things, and they came with all kinds of accessories and stuff.
Now, just to interrupt for a sec, was he the first action figure of his kind?
A lot of people say yes, although if you go back like in the 40s, one of the things you'll see is they made a wooden Superman figure that was jointed. Like, have you ever seen like the artist dummies, the wooden ones that are fully jointed for doing poses?
Right.
There was a Superman like that.
Interesting. So, okay, so we get G.I. Joe, which is made by Mego then?
Nope, that was Hasbro.
Okay, so Hasbro was right there from the beginning. Interesting.
Yep, and that's, if you take that as the genesis of the action figure, there were a lot of other figures that kind of went that route. There was a Major Matt Mason, which were bendable figures. And then G.I. Joe was the most popular.
Was Major Matt Mason an astronaut figure?
Yeah, that was a whole other, they did them originally, the idea was to do realistic astronaut stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And it was super popular, right, like up until the 70s.
For obvious reasons, I suspect.
Yeah, and then what I heard happened was as soon as they landed on the moon and didn't find cities and moon Amazons and stuff, everybody lost interest.
Huh, fancy that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, sorry to interrupt. Continue.
That's okay.
So,
it all kind of ties in.
Oh, okay. So we've got Major Matt Mason, which was also by Hasbro, or was it by a different company?
That was Mattel.
Okay.
Mattel.
So Mattel and Hasbro, both familiar names, I'm sure, to most of our listeners, were producing their own, like, foot-tall action figures, which are nudge, nudge, wink, wink for boys. Got it.
Well, yeah, and that was a thing. In the early 70s, Mego, who started out, they did kind of like the dime store novelty toys and that.
Okay.
They wanted to essentially take a bite out of the G.I. Joe market, and then they did a G.I. Joe copy that I believe was the Fighting Yank.
Okay.
And it was like a cheap G.I. Joe. And what ended up happening in the early 70s was the fuel crisis.
Mm-hmm.
That the price of oil skyrocketed, so it was expensive to get the plastic to make the 12-inch figures.
Right.
And Mego decided to do the same thing, but slightly smaller, and they did Action Jackson, who is an 8-inch figure.
Actually, I've heard of Action Jackson, probably from you, but I think I'd heard of it even before I met you.
You probably remember from as a kid, because they sold millions, like literally millions of them.
Yeah, I suspect probably I saw the commercials. That would be my bet.
Oh, you saw the commercials. Yeah, everybody saw the commercials.
Okay, so they had Action Jackson, and I assume Action did very well for them, so Mego was a successful company.
They were, and then what they did from there was they got the rights to DC superheroes.
Okay, that sounds really good.
It was, and what they would do is, shortly thereafter, they got the rights to Marvel as well.
Mm-hmm.
And what they would do is, they had a couple of generic bodies.
Mm-hmm.
So you had like an 8-inch male, 8-inch female. Later on, they did like a fat dude body. They did like a kid body. What they would do is you'd swap out the heads, the equipment, and the outfits, and then
right.
you could make any character you wanted relatively quick because really all he needed was a head sculpt.
I see. Is that one of the reasons why Mego has become a favorite of toy customizers?
Yeah, it is, because it's actually pretty easy to pull off. Because again, you just have to sculpt a new head
and make one of those weird cloth suits that they all have.
Yeah, and you can whip one of them up once you get the hang of it and have a sewing machine fairly easy.
I see. So you've had to become an accomplished sewer as well when you're making these things.
Yeah, but when I was a little kid, my grandma taught me how to sew, so I already knew how.
So let's just continue our little history lesson, then we'll talk more about actual, making figs and stuff like that, and the community. Okay. So Mego got the rights to make the Marvel and DC stuff. What happened to them next?
Well, they would pick up the rights to damn near anything, and some of the ones that they did that were successful were surprising because they did the Wizard of Oz, the Dukes of Hazzard. They produced their own lines. They did monsters. They did knights. They did pirates.
Awesome.
Yeah, as a kid, they did Star Trek.
Wait, there are Star Trek Mego figures?
Yeah. You don't remember the 8-inch Mego guys?
Oh, now that I think about it, yes, I do. I do remember them with the they had a little phaser that came with them and stuff.
Yeah, it was blue.
Yes, I do remember that.
Yeah.
Thing. Okay. Yep.
Yeah, because again, they were everywhere. And all of this stuff was super popular, and then they ended up later on doing the Micronauts, which was the Japanese Microman line that they took some of the figures, they added some, they changed the story, and they were super popular for a while.
I remember that. And in fact, there's a new Micronauts movie coming out.
Well, they've been humming and hawing about that for a while. Nobody's exactly sure what's going on with that.
But, so they were the ones who actually made the Micronauts a success in North America.
Yeah.
So then I have to ask then, since they had all these mega epic and successful toy lines, what happened to Mego?
There's kind of two stories to this.
Mm-hmm.
And I gotta say, you're getting a really condensed version here for me.
I believe it.
Yeah, if you want to know anything about anything Mego, it's the MegoMuseum.com.
Okay.
We should put up a link to that.
There'll definitely be one in the show notes, yeah.
Yeah, because they have that, the folks there have, researched the hell out of this, and they've gone into in-depth for absolutely everything that happened.
So what you're saying is somewhere there's an angry Mego fan yelling at this recording right now saying you're getting it all wrong.
Quite possibly, yeah.
Okay, well, they can join the rest of our hater club.
Could we have a hater club?
I'm pretty sure we do, or we will in the future at some point.
Why don't they post? I want hate mail. This is the internet, damn it.
Okay, yeah, you heard him, guys. You're letting us down. If you hate this show, please come and comment at obeythedna.com.
Pretend it's YouTube.
Exactly. We want, vitriolic comments. Come on.
Yeah,
I mean, I haven't been able to use my ban button at all.
Oh, the power.
I know. I have this ban button and I can't use it because no one's posting nasty stuff. They're all posting smart, intelligent comments.
Damn them.
I know. Oh, well. So.
Why'd the company die?
Yeah, why'd the company die? You said there are two stories. So what are these two stories? It's like a choose your own adventure.
Yeah. One thing they say is that they kind of got into financial trouble because they overextended.
It happens.
And then one of the rumors, which may have contributed to that but wasn't as big as everybody thinks it is that Mego didn't get Star Wars.
They didn't get Star Wars? There's a rumor they didn't get Star Wars?
Well, they didn't. What happened was because Mego was a huge company. So the story goes is when Star Wars was coming out, Mego was offered first crack at doing the toys.
Makes sense.
But the guy who ended up doing the interview and looking into it was one of the lesser executives.
Mm-hmm.
And he's the one, I forget his name. If you go to the Mego Museum, there's a whole section on that.
Mm-hmm.
But the idea is that he said, well, no thanks. Because remember, like we talked about in a past show, nobody really had high hopes for Star Wars when it came out.
Right.
And then they didn't get it. Rumor has it the heads of the company would have jumped on it.
Mm-hmm.
But they didn't. It went to Kenner, and then we all know what happened from there.
Right. Of course, in hindsight, the heads of the company say, no, we would have jumped on it.
Well, they might have, though, because there was a lot of, like I said, Mego picked up a lot of licenses.
Mm-hmm.
They had the Logan's Run license, actually, but they never put the figures out.
That wasn't exactly a big kids movie, though.
No, and it was the figures they did were based on the TV show.
Oh, okay. But the TV show itself only lasted one season.
Yeah, but I guess it was fairly popular, but they didn't, in the end, they didn't think it was going to be popular enough to do the toys, so they just recycled them.
Oh, okay.
And the few of them that actually did get out as prototypes and that, a lot of collectors are desperately trying to get a hold of, and they're super rare.
Oh, okay.
But they have been seen. I guess there was a documentary back in the 70s that talked about toy manufacturing, and there's a scene where you see them recycling all the Logan's Run figureheads.
Okay.
And yeah, collectors who watch that nowadays just shit themselves. So
I bet they do.
Yeah.
It's like watching them pulp Action Comics #1 with Superman. It's like, yeah, we got all these crappy old comics. We're just pulping them now. And you're just watching them feed them into the pulping machine.
Yeah, that's basically. And then the worst thing, like I said, the figures never came out. One thing people found in, I guess, the 90s was that the outfits they'd done for the Mego ones ended up on some of these, the cheap-ass dollar store Barbie rip-off dolls.
Okay. Why would cheap-ass Barbies be wearing Logan's Run clothes?
Well, because they were already made and they just sell them off.
Okay, makes sense.
Like, again, Mego was huge. When they went under, for like a decade or so afterwards, other companies would just buy dead stock of the bodies, because remember, they did generic bodies, and do new figures using, like, these old Mego bodies, because there was just so many of them when the company went under.
Right. Makes sense.
Yeah, so there was like a couple companies did, like, Bible figures, because I have a Mego Jesus.
Oh, that's awesome.
He hangs out with my Mego Damien Hellstrom, so...
Okay.
So... Yeah.
You can use him as Jesus Christ, Vampire Hunter.
That's true. He's a happy looking... He actually kind of looks like Andy Gibb.
Okay.
You don't know who that is, do you?
Andy Gibb, the name is really familiar.
Bee Gees.
What?
The Bee Gees.
Oh, from the Bee Gees. Yes, I actually... Yeah. Okay, yeah, I know who Andy... Yes, that's why. Yes, I know who he is, yeah.
Yeah, that's who the Mego Jesus looks like. He looks like Andy Gibb.
So he's a very 70s Jesus, then.
Yeah, yes he is.
Okay, I can see that. All right, so Mego dies. It becomes like this, thing that you find in bargain bins and such. How does the whole Mego collectors thing happen?
Collector or customizer?
Okay, I guess we should go with collector first, then we'll get the customizer.
Yeah, there were a lot of collectors just because they were so widespread, and I think pretty much everybody had good memories of playing with them as a kid. Like the Mego style, the 8-inch style figure is a brilliant idea because it's big enough that they're fully posable, that you can make all kinds, like they can actually have guns that come out of the holsters and that. And they're small enough that you can make a lot of stuff for them. So you could do vehicles in that would be relatively affordable for a figure like that. Okay,
yeah, it makes sense. And so were there any, like, Mego, like, collector conventions in the 70s or anything like that?
I don't think there were just Mego ones, but because they did so many other things, like if you went to a comic convention, the 8-inch Mego figures would be popular. If you went to, like, a Star Trek convention, the Star Trek figures would be popular. If you went to, like, a Chips convention, you could have, like, Eric Estrada sign your action figure and stuff.
Sorry to interrupt. I think I remember back in the 90s, we used to go to the Motor City Comic Con in Detroit. And I do remember in the dealer's room them having Mego figures, I think. You could actually see them up, and various dealers had, like, the packs of them and stuff up for sale.
Oh, yeah. Because, again, they were popular. They were even, they did an exchange in Japan with, I believe it was Popy.
Okay.
That did Mego-esque figures. The hands were different because they have, like, big Shogun Warrior punching fists. But they did, like, Mego Ultraman and Battle Fever J and a bunch of the Kamen Rider guys.
Wow. I bet those are real collector's items for some of the American fans, too.
They are, especially because, like, say, the Ultraman ones, to get that kind of semi-shiny sheen to it, the material they use disintegrates.
Ooh. Okay, that's a problem.
Yes, it is.
So, I guess you can get them, but they're not going to be in very good condition at this point.
No. The Japanese ones, not so much.
Were they actually cheaper than the American ones? I mean, quality-wise?
I think they're pretty much the same. It was just, like I said, the Ultramans, it was mostly just the material they had to use.
Right.
So the rest of them, if you can find them, are in about as good a shape, except old Megos tend to be battered because, again, they got played with to death.
Right. Okay, all right, so let's move on then to the whole customizing thing. So we might as well start with you. So how did you get involved with the whole customizing thing?
When I was a little kid, me and my grandfather always wanted to make action figures. And we tried, but you didn't have the technology back then. And then once you got to the 80s, you started having garage kit companies that would, like, literally be a couple of guys making resin model kits. They'd crank out like 50 or 100 of them on their own. And a lot of that kind of material is the stuff that you'd use to do a custom action figure.
Right. Okay, then. And so how specifically did you get involved with, like, Megos and such?
Well, what happened with with the Mego stuff, again, even when I was a kid, because I knew how to sew, I do like extra like equipment and stuff for them. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of people would do that sort of thing, and they always did. But what happened in the early 90s was there was a guy by the name of Charlie Flat that he used to do these really like high quality custom characters using the Mego body as the base. Mm-hmm. And he was kind of the first customizer that anybody knew of. Mm-hmm. And he used to do commissions. It'd be like $100, $200 at the time for a custom figure. I always wanted a custom of one of the characters from my comic. Mm-hmm. And I went looking for this guy to see if I could get one done, and I never found him. But I found a guy by the name of Darren Wiltshire, who sent me a photocopy of an article that Charlie Flat had done about how he does custom figures.
Right.
And then that was what I went off of that. And then getting extra info from the Garage Kit guys for how to cast parts and stuff.
Well, that's one of the things I want to talk about. So this must involve like a fairly intensive process, right? I mean, what's the process to cast one of these things? And don't you need like special resins or plastics as well?
You do, but you can get a lot of it, because of the Garage Kit thing in the 80s, you can get a lot of it fairly easily. Mm-hmm. Like for making the molds themselves, I use GI 1000 room temperature vulcanizing rubber.
And I rest my case.
Oh, yeah, but you can get that. That stuff's fairly, like, there's all kinds of plastic distributors. I get mine out from a place in Mississauga.
Okay.
A lot of people go by the company Smooth On. Mm-hmm. That they make all kinds of different resins and rubbers. Mm-hmm. And then the actual casting of the parts, I use polyurethane. And it comes in two parts. You mix it 1-to-1, and it flows like water, and it hardens within about a minute or so.
And so for the actual sculpts and such, what do you use? You use plasticine? How do you make the actual default, I guess, mold? Or what's that called? The thing you use to actually make the mold out of?
The master?
Yes, yeah, there we go.
I use all kinds of stuff. Because again, I've been building model kits forever, and it's basically the same skill set. So I keep like a bunch of generic heads around. Or if I cast a head and it doesn't work.
I was going to say, see folks, we weren't joking about him having a basement full of heads and body parts.
Oh, I got tons, because one of the other nice things about the Mego body is it's held together by pins and rubber bands.
Okay.
So it's pretty easy. Like, I've cast different hands, different arms, different bodies, and you can just kind of swap it all together to make any character you need.
That's pretty cool. But I have to ask then, if you go through all the trouble to make this mold and to make this character, you can only use it once, right? I mean, isn't that a lot of effort to make just one character?
The mold? No, you can use them a lot.
But do you need more than one of these figures?
I build armies.
Okay, then. But if you're making Superman, you don't need to make like 10 Superman, do you?
Nah, for stuff like that, I do what's called a case mold.
Okay.
You just use the silicone to do the face of the mold, like the parts that are actually going to contact the plastic. Mm-hmm. And then I fill the rest of it in with like plaster of Paris because it's super cheap.
Oh, okay.
And it's not as durable because the thinner the rubber, the more likely it is to tear or warp.
Right.
Because the resin heats up when it hardens. Mm-hmm. But if I only need a couple, then yeah, I do that. But I need my Galactor army, so I did a proper mold for that.
Wait, did you build the thin ones and the fat ones?
I was going to make the bunch because I've been making my way for the last year through the TV show because they put them all out on disc.
By the way, folks, we're talking about Battle of the Planets here, a.k.a. Gatchaman.
Gatchaman.
Yep.
It's Battle of the Planets with the good parts left.
Or I guess it would also be Eagle Riders and G-Force, depending on which dub.
Yeah, it's true.
Okay. So and when he talks about Galactor, he's talking about the generic bad guy minions.
Yeah, because you always need a bunch of generic bad guys.
Well, yes, that way they can have wars with like your Mego Stormtroopers. Do you have Mego Stormtroopers?
I haven't figured out a good way to do the armor yet, but I've got a bunch of them with boots and heads.
Okay. So they're like naked, they just have boots and heads?
Yeah. Right
Okay.
now they're fighting with my Mego Cobra guys.
Actually, I guess I should ask. So, how many Mego figures do you actually have? Like, if one of our guests were to visit your domain, how many figures would he find?
Just the Mego figures?
Yeah, just the Mego figures.
400 or 500.
Sweet Jesus.
Well, once you start making them on your own, you just crank those things out.
Your house must look like a Mego museum.
Kind of. No, then all the model kits and stuff, but yeah, it's getting there.
Yeah, that's in addition to your other toys. Good Lord, man. In case anyone's wondering, Don is single and lives alone.
Yes, he does.
There are very few women on this planet that would probably accept the amount of toys that Don has in his home.
My house is kind of an estrogen-free zone.
Wow, that's impressive. You've been making them for what, then? About 20 years at this point?
Yeah, probably.
Because I think I remember back in university, when I was at the tail end of university, you just started to make these things, I think.
Yeah, because I did the Post Brothers.
Yes, yeah, you did the Post Brothers. I think that was one of the very first molds you made, wasn't it?
Yep, and you can tell because I screwed up the mold, and it turned out a little funky, but it's the Post Brothers.
Okay, yeah, I do remember them. I've seen them. Yeah, You did an okay job, but you'd probably want to go back someday and actually redo them.
Maybe. Just touch up the sculpts were okay. It was the mold that got a little arc-bargled.
Well, you'd just begun, right? So that happens.
Yeah.
Okay, I can totally see that. Okay, so you're actually involved with the Mego community as well, right? There's like a whole customizer community. You're not alone in this obsession.
I kind of drifted away, but yeah, there's if you go to the Mego Museum, there's a lot of guys that do customs there, and a lot of them do fantastic stuff, and they'll trade parts and that with you.
Right.
And there's actually companies that are producing Mego style figures, and like you can buy just Mego bodies from them.
Okay, and how many of these bodies and body parts do they actually make?
Well, it depends. Like, if you go to docmego.com, he sells a few different body parts. He's been doing new figures because they did like figures for the original Night of the Living Dead.
Right.
And he sells a bunch of different kinds of bodies. And the Doc Mego ones are pretty good. There's also classic TV toys. That their stuff tends to be a little cheaper. It's not as high quality, but you can get it in bulk. And they've been doing new Mego figures as well. Because they just started putting out like stuff for the 1966 Batman TV show. And the next one's coming up next is the Monkeys. So if you need a Peter Tork to wrestle with Batman, you're good to go.
Now, are these officially licensed ones, or is this all just under-the-table fan stuff?
Oh no, this stuff is all official.
Wow.
And then there was another company, was it Biff Bang Pow? They did like the original Battlestar Galactica. And they did Lost. And they did like there's a whole bunch. There was another company that was doing United States presidents.
Okay.
And then they would do monster versions of the presidents.
Okay.
And that was really weird. And it's because the Mego community is kind of small but dedicated. So if you can produce something like this, get the licensing for cheap enough to keep the cost relatively low, they do quite well.
It almost sounds like Mego's getting more popular, not less, with time.
Well, it's. I think when you look at the newer fans, I think it might have peaked a couple years ago. But I think there's still enough lifers that it's going to be a viable community at least like until we die.
Wow. Now, do you think that Toy Fair years ago used to have Twisted Mego Theater, which of course eventually evolved into like Robot Chicken, and if I remember right, there's even a version kind of a Robot Chicken / Twisted Mego Theater on Marvel's site called What The that they've been doing.
Yeah, and that's a thing. I forgot all about that. If you watch Robot Chicken, those are Mego figures.
A lot of them are, aren't they? Yeah.
Yeah, they muck with them a little bit so that you can move the joints a little differently for stop action, but those are all essentially Mego figures.
Wow. Huh. I mean, I know they occasionally slip in other, action figure toys and such, but
Yeah.
yeah, you're right. They are pretty much all Mego figures. So what I was going to ask though was, so has all this exposure in pop culture actually brought in people to the Mego community or increased interest?
I think for a little bit it did, and this is why I think it might have peaked, because I don't know if you're going to get like a younger crowd in big numbers, but you got a lot of people who remembered this. And like I said, because this was something, the Mego figures were one of the best toys ever made.
Right.
And it brought back memories for people. And you'd see Robot Chicken, they'd be like, oh, wait, those look kind of like that. And then you see at the end, like, I believe at least in the first couple seasons of that, they credit Doc Mego.
Really?
In the end credits. Yeah.
Huh.
And it's because I'm betting that's where they got a lot of bodies. Because, like I say, he does really good stuff.
Yeah, that wouldn't surprise me. And the Mego figures would be posable enough, I guess, to do the stop motion stuff with.
Yep. There's a, what they call a swivel arm one.
Mm-hmm.
Which Doc Mego does. That it turns like, if you remember the old G.I. Joe 3.5 guys with the battle grip.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's that, and once you do that, yeah, they're pretty posable.
Interesting. Okay. So have you ever thought yourself of using these 400 plus Mego figures to try to do some like Twisted Mego Theater type strips or something with?
Why, I have.
Oh, that's right. You have, haven't you?
Yeah. I take lots of pictures and do little comic strips.
And where could people see these if they wanted to?
Some of my stuff might still be up at the Mego Museum.
Okay, yeah, that's right. You used to put them up at the Mego Museum, didn't you? You used to post them.
Yeah, and there's some of it's floating around online. Because I did a lot of stuff.
Right.
I still do.
Well, maybe when this airs, we could actually like either link to some of that, or you could even post some on the site so people could see them.
Okay, I could do that.
I think that would be pretty cool, actually.
Because I have the ultimate Mego backdrop.
Oh, what's that?
Super City.
What's Super City?
You don't know? Your mom never bought Woman's Day magazine?
My mother was a Chatelaine woman. She didn't buy Women's Day magazine.
Okay, that's because and again for the younger viewers, Women's Day magazine used to totally kick all the ass because they would do articles. My mother used to get it all the time, and they would do articles for different kinds of play sets. And one of the things you could send away for was the plans for Super City, which was a Mego scale city block that you built out of corrugated cardboard.
Wow.
Yeah, a few years ago I tracked down, there's a book, it's the Woman's Day Book of Best Loved Crafts.
Mm-hmm.
And it has the plans in it, and I tracked it down and I built the city, because since I was a kid, I always wanted to finish it.
I bet you did. How much cardboard did that take?
It took a lot.
I bet. And so did you build little cars and little things to go in Mego City?
I've got some.
Okay.
I actually built a 8-inch scale Mego Mangler.
What's a Mego Mangler?
What happened back in the day is Mego kind of flirted with the idea of doing like 3.5-inch figures.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't just because of Star Wars. It was because of Fisher-Price did the Adventure People.
Right.
And those were super popular as well. So Mego did like superheroes, but they're in this weird kind of He-Man-esque squatting pose. And they have this one awkwardly designed hand that we'll have to link to a picture of because it can't be explained.
Okay, then.
They did some vehicles of that. One of the vehicles they did was, it was called the Mangler. It's like, picture a tank, but instead of like a turret, it's got a big mouth on the one end.
Mm-hmm.
And that was one of the toys they came up, and you could have it eat superheroes, and it came with like a cutout of like the character. That came with the Green Goblin, so you could put him in, put the figure in, and then it would come out the back and look like it flattened him.
Okay, then.
It was really silly, but who don't want a tank with like a giant mouth? So I built one in 8-inch scale.
I was going to say you'd have to build it in 8-inch scale, so it must be huge.
Yes, it is. Yeah, it's the same size as my Mego Cyberpunk AV4.
I should need to stop just asking this. This is just shocking. I didn't realize some of these things you'd build. You built a Cyberpunk AV4 for Mego scale. You built a Cyberpunk AV4 in Mego scale.
Yup.
That's crazy.
Yeah, for all my Cyberpunk characters.
Jesus. Okay, wait. How many vehicles have you built to go along with these Mego characters?
Not as many as I'd like, because they take up a lot of space. So...
Okay. Well, I guess you've got to have some vehicles to go with them, so, okay.
Well, it looks good in the city. I had to build Judge Dredd's Lawmaster.
Obviously.
Yeah.
Because you built a Judge Dredd. I imagine that was one of your early Mego figures.
Yeah, because, he's awesome.
Of course. Well, speaking of which, so what is the pride and joy of your Mego collection? What is the figure you are most proud of?
I think the one that I got a bunch that turned out really good. That it's hard to pick the one I think is the best, but usually my silliest ones turn out the best.
Okay, well here, give me your top 3 or 4. It's okay.
Okay, I think the ones that I like the most is my Tor Johnson.
Okay.
Professor Badass.
Who is Professor Badass?
He was an internet meme. You never saw Professor Badass?
No.
No?
Apparently you're more plugged in than I am with some of these memes.
Which is scary, because I'm a Luddite.
I know. I'm feeling really left out here.
No, it was just this picture of this dude walking, down the street, and he just... Somebody labeled him Professor Badass, because that's exactly what he looks like.
Okay, I'll go see if I can find the picture of him for the show notes.
Yeah, if you look up Mego Professor Badass, a picture of my action figure will come up.
Okay, awesome. So you did, okay, Tor Johnson, Professor Badass, who else?
Oh, shoot, there's hundreds.
I want 3 or 4, dude, not hundreds.
Okay. I think the one, though, that I probably like the most, at least at the moment, was Ginger Dalmalic.
Who's Ginger Dalmalic?
It's one of my characters. You don't remember the Dimsfort comic?
Oh, yes, that thing. Yes, okay, yeah. I do remember that.
Yeah, the Uptight Witch.
Yep.
That was the one that I wanted to have a custom done of.
I see. Okay.
But I never got a hold of Charlie Flat back when he was doing that. And then years later, I made one myself.
Right, which is probably better than his would have been anyway.
Maybe, because it's an entire scratch build.
Right.
Which is a huge pain in the ass, but...
I bet it was, but obviously you consider it worth it because it was one of your favorite figures.
Yes.
We'll talk about your comic, of course, in another episode.
Oh, God, no. No!
Don't worry, it's coming. I'm sure our audience will definitely want to hear about that.
Sad story.
That's going to be a long story in and of itself. Probably it's going to take... That'll be our 2-hour special, maybe 3.
Yeah, an hour and a half of which you'll just be sobbing. So...
Exactly. Uncontrolled sobbing. All right. But let's keep this focused here. Okay, so you, if I remember right, also made a little bit of a side business, like actually selling and trading Mego parts yourself, didn't you?
Yeah, I still do that every now and then. Because a lot of guys would trade because I can do guns.
Interesting. Is that hard?
Well, doing guns and characters, they're kind of 2 separate skill sets.
Mm-hmm.
Because guns are all what they call, straight edge carving.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then, characters require, because it's you're doing, a head, there's a lot of different, because it's organic, there's a lot of more subtlety to the carving in that.
Mm-hmm.
So.
That makes sense. Okay. And so you just have a natural talent for building weapons of destruction.
Yeah.
And death.
Yeah, I have a whole stockpile of strange weapons.
Okay. Now that's good to know. So if you need a weapon for your Mego action figures, make sure you get a hold of Don because he is the man.
Anything in 1/8 scale.
Anything in 1/8 scale. Okay. So, Don, where do you see the future of Mego going? Like, what do you think is going to happen with the hobby overall?
Well, it's like a lot of stuff. Like I said, I think probably the heyday of the comeback for like Mego collectors has sort of come and gone.
Oh, really? Okay.
But I think there's enough staying power that it's always going to be a thing.
Right. But hold on a sec. I mean, there's all those figures about movie characters being made right now. And of course, I think Robot Chicken has partly inspired that.
Right.
I mean, if anything, aren't there more Mego figures being made now than ever?
Well, see, that's the irony. Yeah, they are. It was a few years ago, if you counted all the companies doing them, that the total of they call it Re-Mego.
Okay.
The second generation of them.
Okay.
But those outnumbered the ones that Mego themselves actually produced.
Wow. Okay.
The only thing I would say, the only kind of problem, I would say for the current fan market constantly expanding, I think it will, but I think you'll see a more severe drop-off because a lot of people don't have the, I guess, the remembrance of actually playing with them.
Okay.
And a lot of the ones that are coming out now, they're being geared for older fans and collectors, so they're a little more expensive.
Right. So what you're saying, there's going to be no nostalgia connection with these Mego figures?
I think, yeah, for the most part, but you'll have people because, like I said, like Robot Chicken, and Mego's been a presence for a long time. If you look at any, say, comic book, American comic book produced prior to, say, 2000, anytime you saw, like, a character, especially like a superhero, being marketed in the comic, and they'd show the toys, they're Mego action figures.
Okay.
Like, if you go to The Watchmen, when Ozymandias' company was planning on doing figures of him and some of the other characters,
right,
when you see the pictures of them, those are much closer to a Mego-style figure than what you would see, what was being produced at the time toy-wise.
Right. Yeah. That was the heyday of, like, the small G.I. Joes, which are, 3 inches, right?
Yep, which came after the heyday of the Star Wars guys.
Right, yeah, okay. But I guess the Watchmen, of course, were supposed to have a kind of resonance with the old days anyway, the whole nostalgia factor there, too. So that makes sense that the toys would be the Mego-sized toys.
Yep, and plus that's what the people writing it would have remembered as toys from when they were a kid.
Makes sense.
And that's why I say there's always a presence, but it doesn't draw the new audience in like it would if it was kids playing with them.
Well, hold on then. So are you saying that the current collectors don't play with them? Like they don't buy them to play with at all?
You're trying to make me admit to something, aren't you?
No, Don, if you want to play with yourself, that's perfectly okay. It's very acceptable.
I don't play with myself. I play with my little 8-inch friends. My only friends. The only ones who've never betrayed me. I mean, anyway.
All 400 of them.
At least. I've never counted.
Ask them to take roll call sometime.
Well,
if you get an answer, we have a problem.
I have a funny story about that.
Oh?
Do you remember Korn?
Yes, I do, yeah.
The first time he came to my house, I had an army of stormtroopers lined up on the living room table, and I had like an army helmet on, and I was currently dressing one of them down because he didn't salute when I walked into the room.
Okay.
And that was the first time Korn, he just walked in and he saw that, and you could tell by the look on his face, he wasn't sure if that was horrifying or the coolest thing he'd ever seen.
Okay, then. So did that soldier get his salute ready after a while? He actually managed to, tighten up?
Oh, hell yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, he knew better.
Well, when you have a giant drill sergeant yelling at you, I suppose that happens.
Yeah, but anyway. But that's the kind of thing I think, when you talk about any kind of like toys, there are the collectors who are, again, like we've talked about before, that see them as an investment and put them away.
Right.
But there are also the fans who find like novel things to do with them. Like a lot of people would do displays and do little fumetti.
Okay.
Just like the twisted Toy Fair Theater.
Oh, that kind of stuff, right? Okay.
And then people will pose them on top of their computer and that. And I know people who do displays,
right?
And it's just the sort of thing that as an older fan, you get into. You don't necessarily play with them as much, but there's still an appeal to them. That's not entirely nostalgia.
Okay. So you're not playing with them, but you're not collecting them. So what is the appeal then?
Well, like I say, I have to count myself as a fan.
Okay.
Because I get them because I like them. And for me and for a lot of people, that's where the customizing comes in.
Right.
Because as an older fan, part of the appeal is to make figures that were never made. And to have finally a figure of like every character who is ever cool.
Right.
That it's kind of the nerdy version of like the guys who fix cars.
Right.
Or the people who restore old antique furniture and that.
But if you want to make figures of the stuff you like, and you're always finding new stuff you like, isn't that a never-ending process?
Yep.
Okay, well, I guess it's good that you're skilled at making Mego figures then, because you're going to be making a lot of them, I suppose.
Oh, probably.
Speaking of which, so when are you going to make Mego figures of you and I for the show? The Department of Nerdly Affairs.
A lot of people have always been terrified that I was going to start doing that.
I believe it. Well, but they thought you were going to do it as like a voodoo doll or something, right?
Or a replacement. And when I kill you, your soul will inhabit this and bring it to life. But I would never do that.
Okay. Right. If anything happens to me, folks, you know what happened.
Get help. He's in the studio with me.
Luckily, we record these separately from each other, so that's not really an issue at this point.
There's an endorsement.
Unless you're using your cell phone and you're really downstairs, in which case I have a problem on my hands.
That's where you're safe. I'm a Luddite.
Oh, okay. Awesome.
I don't have a cell phone.
Okay. Well, you could use like a wire in a tin can, I suppose. That would work too. Okay. So do you think that things like 3D printing are going to affect like the future of Mego?
I think because I know that there's guys now that produce like custom parts using 3D printers.
Right.
They're a little expensive, and the plastic they use is mostly like ABS.
Okay.
Like what a Lego block is made out of.
Wouldn't that make them incredibly rigid?
It does, and it's trickier to work because it doesn't necessarily hold paint as well.
Okay.
And it can be trickier to get parts that'll fit together because they don't have a lot of plasticity.
Okay.
But once they get different materials and that, I'm sure you'll see that.
Right. Eventually anyone will basically be able to print off their own little Mego figures based on templates and such. You just customize them using some special program. You can make your favorite character, and bing, it'll pop out a toy version or maybe a figure version or a doll version or whatever you want.
Yeah. I think you'll probably start seeing that because when you think about how the wave of nostalgia works in a roughly like 20-year cycle,
right?
You're looking at people getting nostalgic for the 90s.
God help us.
And the 90s was when you had like action figures become collectible.
That's true.
And you had mentioned like the McFarlane figures earlier.
Yeah.
And that was what kind of started that ball rolling. And they were minimally articulated, but they were super detailed because, again, they weren't meant as playthings. They were collectibles.
Right.
And I think once you see the people who have that kind of attitude move to the fore with the advancements in 3D printing, I think you'll see a big boom in that because it's a lot easier to have a printer print out a finished figure. Like a figurine maybe that's not even articulated but has all of that detail.
That makes sense, actually. And in fact, you could actually create even highly articulated but highly detailed figures eventually, too.
Yeah, and it would take kind of a hand assembly after you've done all the parts, which I don't know if you'll get as many people interested in.
Right.
Because I know a lot of people now who do like the custom Megos, they use old school sculpting techniques. And that's part of the appeal. That's part of the fun, the tactileness of it.
Right, yeah, the physically building something. And I think that'll hold true for a lot of people. I mean, many people like to work with their hands one way or the other, and this has that physical appeal that even if you're creating like 3D sculpted, like computer graphic characters that you could eventually like render, there's still, it's not quite the same, I think, as making a character in, out of plastic or whatever with your own hands, like molding it and shaping it and painting it, etc. Right. But then again, I'm a little bit Luddite too, so probably that attitude won't apply to the next generation.
Well, I think you'll always have some of that. And I think, again, for like the people who do custom Mego figures, because the figures themselves were so tactile, like that was the idea going back to the original G.I. Joe, that you had a posable figure with all kinds of accessories, and they had pouches you could put things in, and holsters that would hold weapons, and you could have actual slings on the weapons, and their hands would hold stuff, and you could add extra armor. That'll always be part of the figure, and I think, again, that's why the tactile joy of building it with your own two hands carries over.
Right. That makes sense. And yeah, being physical beings, we still have that urge to actually make things physical. Although I can imagine some people might just be okay with like sculpting them digitally, having them rendered by a 3D printer, and then just playing with them. That would probably work too.
Well, it could, and I'm wondering, because this is where, like I said, I think the Savory Mego movement might have peaked, but it's possible a technological advancement could see a return of that, for that reason, that you would have, thanks to like 3D printing and manufacture on demand, it would again be cheap to produce a Mego style figure.
Yes, it would, yeah.
And then they'd be produced as playthings again, and then kids would actually play with them. And then you'd build up that large pool of nostalgia that would then, when they get older, they'd recollect them. You'd probably have the same idea that people would want to customize them, and things like that.
Okay, that can definitely make sense. I mean, one of the selling points are actually here. Are you familiar with Microsoft's HoloLens? Do you know what that is? It's basically Microsoft's augmented reality system. So where they're imprinting stuff over the real world. You wear these incredibly dorky looking glasses that look, have you ever seen the magnifying glasses that people in the old days used to use? And you'd wear regular glasses underneath, then you'd have these extra huge magnifying visor, and they put them on for looking like at stamps, or if old people, if they had weak eyes, for reading. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I use stuff like that when I sculpt sometimes.
Yeah, exactly. So that's basically what the HoloLens glasses look like. And you're kind of focused through these tiny little lenses. But anyway, so they imprint data over the world. But one of the things that they've been selling is the idea that, and they have computer animated versions of this in their promo videos, etc., is the idea of building stuff and using it as a sculpting tool for creating 3D objects and for 3D things, and then use 3D printer to actually bring that thing into the real world to make an actual hard copy of it.
Okay.
So they've kind of been already pushing that idea of it kind of as a hobby of, well, of course, these aren't commercially available yet, I should note. These are still in developers' hands right now. But they're pushing the idea of doing 3D sculpting with these things and then pairing that with the 3D printing technology, which would apply to statues originally, but eventually I think would apply to toys and other things like that too.
Yeah. Well, it'd go commercial in a hurry.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Once it worked.
Once it's practical and once it's cheap enough.
Yeah.
So I suspect here we're looking 5 to 10 years. 5 to 10 years from now, I'd say 10 years definitely for cheap enough. 5 years for practical. And I might even be actually underestimating how fast things are going to change. But that's what we're looking at right now. So, yeah, I can see that affecting the toy market and such. But, I mean, at that point, toys will be like anything else, right? You'll be able to go through a catalog, see a toy. It's like, yeah, I want that toy. And you just 3D print a copy of it off. Yeah. At least for physical hard plastic toys. Stuffed things, that's a little trickier.
In theory, yeah, but all you'd have to do is you'd have to come up with a device that would produce that would do all the machining on its own.
Right.
That you just keep stocked with material.
Well, my mother has a advanced sewing machine that effectively you just feed thread and material into the damn thing. It's basically almost a 3D printer. You just feed that stuff in, and it will just print out patterns. It'll print out all sorts of things onto the actual cloth, and to some degree even shape it. I don't know if it'll cut the cloth, but it could easily do that if it wanted to, I suppose. Or they could make one that could do that.
Yeah.
At this point, making 3D printed clothes, I guess it wouldn't count as 3D printed, but a cloth printer basically, or clothing printer, is totally doable, I'd say.
Oh, hell yeah. Like, there's actually a bunch of the Mego guys have done that.
Oh, okay.
That for the outfits, they print them out, they print the patterns out on cloth.
Mm-hmm.
And then you just cut them out and you sew them up on your own.
Okay, yeah, that would work. So are some of them actually even like selling those? You can actually get these outfits for your characters?
Oh, there was one fellow a few years ago. I got a Creature from the Black Lagoon from him.
Wow, okay.
And it was a kit. It was castings of the head, the hands, and the feet.
Mm-hmm.
And then one of these cloth printed outfits. And no, it looks magnificent. It actually looks like, because it's essentially a little version of the suit that the guy actually wore. Like,
right, yeah, it would look perfect.
It does, and I could see at some point you'll have a lot of stores, especially like clothing stores, and that will be manufacture on demand.
I think that's going to happen soon. Yeah.
Yeah, that it would go in, you pick the outfit, it does the measurements, and then they have like a little mini factory in the back that fires all of this stuff up, prints it out. There's probably a couple of people who will be back there sewing it up, checking it out, and then it's done. They don't carry any actual stock.
Yep. I think variants of 3D printing or that kind of printing is basically the future of almost everything, like almost all manufactured goods.
Yeah, because you're already seeing that, again, we mentioned before with like the role-playing games.
That's true.
That most companies are putting out PDF copies of them now.
Yeah, and if you want to print it off, you just go down to your local Kinko's or mailboxes, etc., or whatever is around you, and just tell them to make it into a book, and they do.
Well, they might not because there'll be copyright problems.
Oh, yeah, well, okay, there is that.
But you can buy, like, my cheap-ass $70 printer can do everything except the binding.
Right. Actually, that's true. I wonder if they would do the binding. Like, you could probably still go to Kinko's with copyrighted material and get them to bind it because they didn't actually print it.
They'll be iffy. Like, I've had problems. I've gone, there was one place that I used to go to, they got a new person working. And the one time I went, she refused to print my stuff. It was my actual comic.
Right.
That I had done because she didn't think it was mine.
Right, yeah. She thought you're printing off someone else's work, yeah.
Yeah. Which is kind of flattering and frustrating at the same time.
Yeah, that is pretty cool, actually. Congratulations. You're a plagiarist.
But awesome. Yeah, of myself.
Of yourself, exactly.
But you can do, like, you can just go to, like, Staples Net. You can buy binding machines.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
I think you can get, like, a cheap one for, like, $20. And it's just like a press. You can do the spiral ones where it's like a hole punch, except it punches, like, 20 holes. And then you just, the spirals are you just wrap them around the thing and you're good to go.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, so there's lots of options.
Yeah, and like I say, I think in the future that'll be a standard for most things. That it'll be done like that.
Well, there's already so many print-on-demand books as it is. I mean, it's almost not worth going to Staples. You just need to either send the PDF to some service online, or just you get it from the actual company. Yeah,
because I know that was for old game books. Because as I said before, I'm trying to finish my collection. There's a lot of the guys that have the rights to them now. That will do that. You can order an actual book from them. They print them, bind them on demand, and just send it to you.
Yeah. Well, they don't even do it themselves. They just give the rights to another service.
Yeah.
And then that service does it for them. So, and they just get the profit, basically. They just share the profit with the service.
Yeah.
So, yeah, 3D printing is going to change the world. In good and bad ways.
Yep.
I read somewhere that actually Apple is effectively making the world's most advanced robotic factory. It's somewhere in California. I think they're still working on it. The idea being that it's It is, in effect, a kind of gigantic 3D printer is the best way to describe it. It's basically because they don't want to pay, underpaid Chinese laborers to do it anymore. It's basically just going to take bits and assemble them into whatever Apple wants. And yeah, there'll be some retooling and redesigning involved, but as these things get more advanced, things required physically will become less and less. And eventually they'll just be able to basically say, yeah, here's the new design, print this up.
Yeah.
And bang, it'll assemble it. As many copies as they want.
Well, there was a thing online. There's it's a Lego series that it's motorized and such, but you plug it into your computer, and the computer will control the servos and stuff. And originally you'd make like robots and
right.
There was a bunch of people made a factory out of Lego that makes things in Lego.
Holy crap.
That there's little, and the ones they had were very simple, but it's programmed with simple, like 5 or 6 brick designs.
Right.
And there are hoppers, and this entire thing's like made out of Lego.
Okay.
And there are hoppers full of loose blocks, and you'd program it in, and this machine made out of Lego would take all these Lego components and snap them together and make your finished Lego thing out of Lego from a factory of Lego.
I, for one, welcome our new Lego overlords.
Yeah, who would have thought, eh?
Wow. Well, there's a kid, actually, who made it like a Braille printer out of Lego. I saw an article about that. He basically took what's considered like a $2,000, that they start at $2,000, printer, and he basically made a Lego version they could make for like $20 to $30. And yeah, so it's impressive what people can do nowadays. We're sitting on the real edge of a revolution at this point.
And yeah, because this is people doing these things for shits and giggles.
Yep.
But they have actual real world applications, and they kind of point to what things are going to look like in 5, 10, 15 years.
Yeah, it's going to be some scary shit. Kind of going back to our cyberpunk discussion not too long ago.
Yep.
Because the question is, what are people going to do?
Yeah.
Basically sit there and play with their Megos, I guess.
If they're lucky.
Well, that's true. Because you'd require a job to be able to have money to afford to, buy those Megos or pay for the 3D printed Megos or whatever.
Yeah.
So that's a bit of a problem.
Although by that time the machines will have achieved sentience, and you can pick up a couple of bucks by becoming a techno-barbarian warlord and going out into the wasteland and taking down some of the nanite-controlled zombies that the computer general is using to attack the last human freeholds.
That sounds like a bunch of Mego figures you need to make.
I already did, but anyway.
Somehow I knew that. Somehow I knew that before I said it.
You have to have an army of zombies, and besides, if it was Doc Mego, put out a zombie kit.
And you proceeded to make how many of them?
I have a lot.
Well, I guess if you're going to stage zombie assaults, you have to have that. As I said, you need to make more of those like Twisted Mego theater type things.
Take a website unto itself.
Well, yes, but it would be a good hobby and be a good use of all these Megos. It's both a way to entertain and show off your Mego collection at the same time. I mean, you've got all these figures. You might as well do something with them, besides playing with them, obviously, and enjoying them in various other ways we're not going to talk about.
That's nice. But it would be a chance for Tor Johnson and Professor Badass to team up.
Exactly, and that would be most awesome.
I would watch the hell out of that.
Oh, yeah, exactly. You can just see Tor there you can just see Tor as Professor Badass's big sidekick. That would actually work out really well, actually.
Yes, it would.
That's like, wow, that's a great pulp image.
Time for Crush Evil.
Okay, that works. Okay, on that note, was there anything else you wanted to talk about related to Mego?
No, I think this is pretty much it. Like I say, I think that they've been cemented enough in pop culture and the minds of fans and even people who have no idea that they used to be a thing unto themselves, that they'll be a thing for a very long time. Even if the peak frenzy may have cooled off a bit for now.
Right.
But I think they'll always be a thing.
Okay, I could see that. Well, so in that sense, they've basically become kind of like comic books. They'll be always part of our culture in some way.
Yep. And on top of that, think about when I die and they go through my house and find hundreds upon hundreds of these things.
Okay.
The resulting news story is going to flare up interest all over the globe. I know
I imagine so. Actually, there's a slightly morbid question. What would you want done with all these Mego figures when you go? Do you want to be buried with them?
Oh, I don't care. I'll be dead. You won't hear any complaints out of me.
Oh, okay. Just wondering.
Wait, are you sizing up my collection?
No, but that Professor Badass figure is pretty cool looking. There'll be a link in the show notes, guys. You'll be able to see them. In fact, actually, no, I will make your image of Professor Badass this episode's picture on the website. That way everyone can see him, because he is actually really cool looking.
In real life and as an action
I know, he works both ways.
Why doesn't that guy, star in movies?
Well, because he normally doesn't look like that.
I don't know. He's a fashion critic. If you ever look him up online, no, he's quite the styling dude.
I believe he is, but he doesn't look like that Professor Badass look all the time. In fact, the picture I saw of him, he doesn't even have the beard anymore. Or
yeah, I've seen some of those too, but no, man, grow it back. He needs to be in movies.
I know. He's like the ultimate pulp hero we never knew we wanted.
No kidding.
Okay. All right, on that note, thanks for listening, everyone. And tune in next time where we talk about, well, it'll be a surprise.
The Star Wars Holiday Special.
God, no. Good night, folks.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to the show. If you'd like to hear more or join the conversation, come visit us at obeythedna.com. You can also find us on iTunes or whatever fine podcast site forgot to lock their back door. So until next time, remember that to master the nerdly arts takes time, practice, and enough Coca-Cola to drop a rhino. See ya! Come on over and join the conversation at obeythedna.com, where you will find show notes and more.